My dad texted me 5 words that morning. Thanksgiving's full. Maybe next year. No call, no explanation, just a casual rejection glowing on my screen. I stared at it for a second, then typed back, no worries, because that's what you say when your heart's already numb. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just walked to the window of my Seattle apartment and looked out at the rain. They had no idea what I was about to do. 1 week later, while their house filled with laughter and wine, mine filled with light and music, 200 strangers eating at the ranch they didn't even know I owned. And when the photos hit Facebook, let's just say, the silence finally broke. Before I tell you everything, hit like and drop a comment. Have you ever been left out by your own family? Seattle rain always sounded like static against the glass, soft, endless, familiar. That morning after my dad's text, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and realized something I'd known for years in our family silence wasn't peace. It was exile disguised as manners. My name's Vera Stone, 32, the youngest of 3. My father, Robert, runs a logistics company that used to feel like the world's center. My mother, Elaine, decorates every holiday table like it's for a magazine spread. My sister Marissa, the golden child, hosts those dinners, all charm and control, making sure I always have the smallest chair, the farthest corner. My brother Noah. He's kind but quiet, the kind of person who apologizes for existing. Every Thanksgiving since I can remember, there was a kids' table even when we weren't kids anymore. Plastic chairs, paper plates, the table leg that wobbled no matter how you folded the napkin under it. Marissa's friends filled the main dining room. I filled the silence. When I got my full scholarship to Stanford, Dad said, "That's nice, but maybe stay close like Marissa did." When my startup Northlink Systems sold for millions last year, he texted, "Proud of you, honey." No call. Just another quiet pat on the head across 1,000 miles. That's how we work words that look kind, sound neutral, but cut clean. I stared at his latest message, Thanksgiving's full, and thought about every maybe next year before it. Then my eyes landed on the stack of closing papers pinned to my board. White Valley Ranch, Montana. $5 million. My name on every page. They didn't know I'd built something of my own and escape a place no one could uninvite me from. I picked up my phone, typed "no worries," and pressed send. Then I leaned back and whispered to the empty room, "This year I'm setting my own table." I tried to tell myself it didn't matter that I'd outgrown wanting a seat at their table, but the truth sat heavy in my chest like cold stone. Every drizzle that streaked the Seattle window reminded me of the foldable table back home in Portland, the one that always rocked under my elbows, the one they called temporary but never replaced. That night, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, Marissa cutting the turkey, Mom glowing beside her dad, raising his glass. And somewhere at the edge of the frame, blurred, I was carrying a tray. Always moving, never seated. When I finally called my brother Noah, he answered on the third ring, already knowing what this was about. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "Is it true Thanksgiving's full?" There was a pause too long to be innocent. He sighed. "Yeah. Dad said it'd be small this year. Just Marissa's family, some friends." "You know to keep it simple." "Simple," I repeated. "Right, you know how they are," he said softly. "They didn't mean it like, it's fine." I cut him off. I meant it when I said no worries. But when we hung up, my jaw clenched until it hurt. Because simple had always meant without you. For years, I'd convinced myself distance was protection. I'd stayed busy, built a company from the ground up, turned every scar into a blueprint. But now, for the first time, the silence didn't sting. It challenged me. If their table was full, I'd fill mine too, just differently. I stood and pulled the ranch file from my desk. The papers were still crisp, smelling faintly of cedar from the contractor's office. In my mind, I could already see it, a long oak table under golden lights, snow outside, the scent of turkey and rosemary drifting through the air. Not a family of blood, but one of choice. I opened my laptop and drafted a message to my assistant, call Sheriff Collins in White Valley. Ask about local shelters or anyone who needs a meal tomorrow. And order more ovens, overnight. Minutes later, replies started rolling in: suppliers, volunteers, drivers. The plan was moving before I could second-guess it. For the first time in years, I felt the kind of heat that didn't burn it built. The ache that had lived in me since childhood began to shift into something sharper, cleaner. If my family wanted small, I would make big sacred again. If they wanted polite, I'd make kindness loud. Thanksgiving wasn't about who invited me anymore. It was about who I decided to feed. The next morning, the valley was wrapped in fog thick enough to swallow sound. I woke before dawn in the ranch house, the air still smelling of pine and cold earth. For once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like space waiting to be filled. I threw on a flannel-poured coffee into a chipped mug and sat at the long oak table in the kitchen. Its surface gleamed faintly in the half-light, smooth and wide enough to seat everyone who'd ever been told there wasn't room. My phone was already buzzing messages from Sheriff Collins confirming he'd reached the shelters and the church. "You're serious about this?" he'd texted. "Completely," I replied. Then came Pastor Grace Holloway, her voice warm but astonished when she called. "Vera, child, I've prayed for something like this for years. We'll spread the word." It didn't take long. By noon, volunteers began to arrive. Margaret, a retired caterer, rolled in with pie crusts. Elena, a nursing student fresh off a night shift, brought boxes of canned goods. Even a few truckers stopped by unloading sacks of potatoes and firewood from their rigs. Inside the house, every sound layered over the next pot's clanging laughter, bouncing off cedar walls, the rhythmic scrape of knives on cutting boards. For years, my family's version of Thanksgiving had been about appearances, perfect china, polite conversation, shallow gratitude. This one was different. The air smelled like butter and cinnamon, like work and warmth. I stood in the doorway watching everyone move sleeves, rolled up faces flushed with effort. It hit me. Then this was the first time in my life I'd been surrounded by noise that didn't hurt. At one point, Marco and Jen, my old co-founders, walked in with crates of supplies. "You sure you're not starting another startup?" Marco joked. I smiled. "Maybe. One that runs on kindness instead of code." As daylight faded, the kitchen glowed gold from the ovens. Steam fogged the windows. The valley outside disappeared into white. I moved through the rooms, lighting candles, checking the tables, making sure every chair stood firm. At the head of the hall near the fireplace, I placed a single carved chair for the one who felt unseen. It wasn't just a decoration, it was a declaration. Standing there, I realized something simple but seismic. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. While my family toasted themselves in Portland, I was preparing a feast for 200 strangers. They had told me the table was full. They were right. It just wasn't theirs anymore. By the time dawn broke on Thanksgiving Day, White Valley looked like a postcard. Snow powdered the fences, the air shimmered silver, and smoke rose from the chimneys in slow ribbons. The ranch, once quiet and forgotten, pulsed with life. Inside the kitchen sounded like a heartbeat, steady, strong, unstoppable. Margaret was at the counter rolling dough with military precision. Elena stirred gravy in a copper pot twice her size. Marco and Jen had turned the barn into a dining hall, stringing lights between the beams until the place glowed like a galaxy. When I walked in, everyone was already working in rhythm, calling out ingredients, laughing over burned rolls, sharing stories. I could almost feel my younger self watching from the corner, the one who used to scrub silverware while the real family toasted. This time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt anchored. By noon, the valley came alive. Cars crunched up the snowy road, farmers' truckers, single parents, veterans, nurses, strangers who'd heard the announcement on the radio or from Pastor Grace's Sunday sermon. They arrived shyly at first, stamping snow off their boots, looking around as if waiting for someone to tell them they didn't belong. No one ever did. I stood at the entrance apron dusted with flour, greeting each person by name as they wrote it on their tag. "Welcome home," I said. Some smiled, some teared up. Inside the barn, the oak tables stretched endlessly, candles flickering between bowls of mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and fresh bread. The air smelled of sage butter and cedar. Music played softly in the corner, a fiddle, a guitar, a voice humming something that sounded like hope. Then, just as we were setting the final dishes, Walt Briggs, a tall man in an old army jacket, stepped inside. His beard was graying, his hands shaking from the cold. "Am I in the right place?" he asked. You are, I said, pulling out a chair. He sat slowly, his eyes scanning the hall. It's been 10 years since I've had Thanksgiving with anyone, he whispered. When the meal began, voices filled the air, soft at first, then louder, warmer. Plates clattered, glasses clinked, laughter rolled like music. People who had walked in as strangers began leaning into one another's stories. At one point, Pastor Grace stood and raised her glass. For the table that never runs out of room, she said, and for the woman who built it. I shook my head, smiling. No, I said, for everyone who showed up. Then Walt stood up. His chair scraped the floor and the room quieted. He held his glass-high voice steady but thick with emotion. I lost my wife in 2013, he began. Since then, I've spent every Thanksgiving alone, usually with a frozen dinner and the TV for company. But tonight, his voice cracked. Tonight feels like she came back for a visit. No one moved. Then, one by one, people began to clap. Slow, heavy, honest. The sound rolled through the hall until even the rafters seemed to hum with it. Walt smiled through tears, sitting back down as laughter followed the applause. That was the moment I realized I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I wasn't building a better version of their table. I'd built something entirely new. Later that night, someone took a photo me standing behind the long table, candles' glowing faces turned toward one another in laughter. They posted it online with a caption, "If your house doesn't have space, Montana does." By morning, the post had gone viral. Local news called it the Open Table Thanksgiving. Photos spread across Facebook. Walt's smile, the carved chair by the fire, the sign over the barn door that read, "Everyone has a seat," and then my phone started buzzing. At first, I ignored it, but when I saw the names Dad, Mom, Marissa, my chest tightened. Message after message. Dozens! Dad, what the hell did you do, Vera? The whole town's talking. Mom, people think we excluded you. Do you know how that makes us look, Marissa? Wow. Couldn't let me have one day without making it about you? Huh. I stared at the screen, the same glow that had carried their rejection, now carrying their outrage. I picked up the call when it came again. Dad's voice burst through. Vera, you made us look heartless. I took a sip of coffee, staring at the empty plates around me. Did I? Mom's voice cut in, gentle but trembling. We just wanted a small Thanksgiving, honey. Small, I repeated softly. You mean selective? That's not fair, Dad snapped. We thought you were busy anyway. I was, I said, feeding 200 people you didn't have space for. There was silence, long and fragile. Then another voice joined the call. Aunt May. I've heard enough, she said, calm but razor sharp. Robert, Elaine, you've been setting a table for 4 your whole lives and acting surprised when one seat stays empty. Don't you dare blame her for finally building her own. No one spoke. Even Marissa's breath caught. You talk about family like it's decoration, May continued. Vera showed the world what it actually looks like. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was already echoing in their silence. Finally, I said quietly, You told me Thanksgiving was full. You were right. It was full of the right people. Dad exhaled hard. You made us look bad. I smiled faintly. No, Dad. You did that all by yourself. The line went dead. Outside, snow was falling again, blank and endless. Inside, the fire burned low, and the last of the volunteers were sweeping crumbs into their hands, still laughing softly. For years, I'd tried to earn a seat at their table. I didn't realize until now I'd outgrown it. That night, as the valley fell quiet, I walked to the carved chair near the hearth. The wood was warm under my hand. For the one who felt unseen, I whispered, Looks like they finally saw. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to be invited anywhere. I was already home. By the next morning, the ranch smelled like the aftermath of joy. Wood smoke, butter, and candle wax still hanging in the air. The long table was covered in crumbs and wax strips, a battlefield of gratitude. Outside, snow had buried every footprint from the night before, as if the valley itself wanted to keep the memory untouched. I sat by the window, coffee cooling in my hands, scrolling through photos people had tagged me in. Veterans, nurses, families all smiling beneath the banner that read, "Everyone has a seat." Dozens of captions said the same thing: faith in humanity restored. Wish I'd been there. And under one photo of Walt Briggs raising his glass, someone had commented, "Her parents must be so proud." I didn't respond. Some truths didn't need correcting. A week later, I sent a short message to my parents' dinner. Just us, Sunday. They came. No entourage, no decorations, just the three of us sitting in the ranch kitchen. No one said much at first. Then I told them what they needed to hear. "You didn't lose me because I left," I said quietly. "You lost me because I stopped asking to belong." Mom's eyes welled. Dad's hands tightened around his mug. For once, they didn't defend, didn't explain, just listened. When they left that night, Mom lingered at the door, looking out at the snow. "You made something good, Vera," she said softly. After their taillights disappeared, I stood for a while in the silence. It didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. The following week, I hung a new sign over the barn. The open table, every Thanksgiving. It wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about keeping the door open for anyone who'd ever been told there was no room. Every year since the ranch comes alive again when the first snow falls. Lanterns glow, the tables stretch long, and strangers walk through the doors as if they've always belonged here. Veterans, nurses, truckers, neighbors, no one asks who you are, only if you're hungry. I still carve the same chair by the fire, the one that reads, "For the one who felt unseen." Some years I sit there myself. Most years someone else does. And every time I look around that room, faces lit by warmth and laughter, I remember the message that started it all. Thanksgiving's full. Maybe next year. Turns out this is next year. If you've ever been left out and built your own table instead, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.